So Siobhan, would you like to get started with the introductions? I think we've a good couple more coming in, but just in the interest of time, we might just get started.
That's great, Amanda. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. This is part of a series of educational webinars, and just as quick bit of homework before we get started, or admin. So today's session will be recorded and the recording plus slides will be available afterwards. As we present, if you have any questions, you can put them into chat and we will cover the questions at the end. So I'd like now to do our introductions. We're delighted today to have an invited guest speaker, Dave Brown, Managing Director of ASD. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, how are you?
Morning. And so myself and Amanda, we've met before. So I'm Siobhan Duggan, Director of Innovation and Healthcare, and my colleague Amanda, who you just heard from, is our Healthcare Project Management Executive with GS1 Ireland. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today. The topic of today's webinar is, if we go into the next slide, we'll just go into the agenda, Amanda. Yeah, so it's the basics of RFID.
Sorry, Siobhan, I've just got a comment that somebody can't hear you, so I just want to check now. Just
my apologies. Can you hear me, Amanda?
I can hear you okay. So and so
okay.
I don't think there is any audio problem, Martin. So maybe if you could let me know if you can hear okay now, or
okay, great. Well, look, I'll continue, and if there continues to be an issue, let us know, or maybe others can let me know as well, please.
Yeah, so others have just said there that they can hear okay, so hopefully,
great,
Martin.
Okay. Might be a case of switching volume on
yeah.
laptops.
Okay, so sorry for interrupting. Thank you.
Not at all, thank you. So the topic today is Basics of RFID. I suppose I've been involved in this space for quite a while, and it always takes a while to explain and understand what it's all about. So objective of today is to explain in plain English, in a non-technical way, what RFID is, what you need to even to get started, what you need to be considering, and I suppose that's really the agenda today, is the what, where, when and why. Some examples as well of RFID in action, the types of tags, why use RFID, and really I suppose how to get started, including some of the benefits and key takeaways. I'll also mention that, and we'll cover it shortly as well, there's a number of different technologies in this area, and often the language can get mixed up or misunderstood. So while we will give you an overview as to the different technologies, the focus is actually on the RAIN RFID, so the UHF Gen 2 protocol, which is based on the GS1 standards. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll understand what that means. So the next slide then, I suppose as you saw from my title, I'm heavily involved in healthcare, as is Amanda, but actually RFID covers many different industry sectors, and Dave will comment on that in a few moments. In terms of giving an example of the vision for patient safety, so today we're seeing a lot of programs starting in hospitals to scan products, consumable items in theatre. But I think the future, as RFID becomes more established, is we'll have a combination of scanning and the tracking of items and people and other things within the healthcare setting using a combination of barcodes and RFID tags. So as you can see here, the RFID tag can be picked up when it passes a reader, either a mobile or a fixed reader, whereas the barcode, which is certainly you know, much more barcode scanning is happening, but it does require a physical scan. So while barcoding is fantastic, and I think we'll see a lot more of it coming, the limitation is that it's not automatically picked up unless there's a physical scan. And obviously multiple benefits in the area of improving patient safety, opportunities to recall more effectively, inventory optimization is huge opportunity, the whole purchase to pay process, and patient level costing. So if we go on then, and I think Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Siobhan, I really like this slide because what it shows is that there's a mix of items in the room. So the GS1 standard allows you to identify each of those items and also locations, which are GLNs. So that gives, I suppose, from a software perspective, invaluable opportunity to capture all the information via fixed reader or handheld, so that we can associate everything together at a location. And in this case, in theatre, I can make sure that I have everything that I need before I start.
Thank you, Dave. And it's a good actually reminder that I should say, and we've covered it in some other webinars, but maybe no harm to mention it again here, is that the reason it's so important to include the GS1 standard here is that rather than just having a number in a tag or in a barcode, the GS1 standard adds a level which tells the system, I am a location, I am a product, I am a doctor. So you're designing in that security and safety from the start, which is very important. So if we go to the next slide, Amanda, please. So as just touched on there, so I suppose we talk a lot about barcoding, and here are some examples of the types of barcodes that the GS1 identifiers can be included in. Your point of sale barcode, traceability barcodes, which include batch expiry sometimes. The 2D data matrix can hold a lot of information, and that's often the barcode we see used in healthcare. As I mentioned, the barcode requires a physical scan. The same information can be included in an RFID tag. It's a serialized tag, so you're always tracking when you're using RFID. You always know exactly which item, and you follow that item, that event through the system. And that is a tag is picked up through a scan by a fixed reader or a mobile reader. The range, which we'll cover in a future slide, can be up to 100 meters. It really depends on the different types of technology and different read ranges depending on tag sizes and types, etc. So that's a very quick overview. When we talk about barcodes and tags, that's what we're talking about. And then we've just touched on there in the previous slide around the standard identifiers for RFID. So equally for barcodes as for RFID, you have different identifiers depending on what you're looking to identify. So very quick summary for trade items, it's the GTIN. We often hear reference to that. So that's the barcode, typical barcode that you see in supermarkets or on pharmaceutical medical device. Locations is another identifier. Logistical units, moving pallets. We're seeing more and more use of RFID in that space as well. GSRN for service relationships, which can identify staff, patients, other people within the system. Assets is a huge opportunity, and we'll cover that in a number of areas, and documents and many more. But I suppose it's important, as I mentioned, to note that when we talk about RFID, we're talking about the UHF Gen 2 tags, which are based on the GS1 standards. You'll also see reference to EBCIS. We won't go into that today, but I think that because there's a whole webinar, additional future webinar in that, but it's essentially the standards for events databases. So as you set up an events database to track and trace all of the different tags, there's GS1 standards to do that and protocols and vocabulary around that. So it's just to reference that we'll be coming to that at a future point. And I think this slide I'm going to hand over to Amanda.
Yes, so thank you, Siobhan. So first of all, what is RFID? So RFID stands for radio frequency identification, and it uses electromagnetic fields to automatically identify and track tags which are attached to objects. So as you can see from the various components in the diagram on the slide, RFID is a set of 8 enabling technologies and not just a single product. So it is comprised of hardware, software, and as Siobhan already detailed, best practice implementation for UHF tags, encodes GS1 standard identifiers, and is combined with software systems which are GS1 compliant. So starting at the left of the diagram, we have an item which is tagged with an RFID tag, which is encoded with GS1 identifiers. So in simple terms, when these tags pass by a reader which emits a signal, the tag will also emit a signal which will be received by this reader, and its data will be fed into a system and recorded as an event. So as Siobhan mentioned, this can enable automatic event tracking, and with GS1 identifiers encoded into RFID tags, you can not only know what an item is, but also where it is now and where it has been before. So added to this, systems can include the when, so with a timestamp of the event, and tied to a process step, the why. So, and this is, as Siobhan mentioned, the GS1 standard EPCIS. So Dave will speak in more detail later on about particular applications. But Dave, as a software provider, is there anything else you'd like to add here?
Well, I suppose, Amanda, the key thing for me on this slide is the fact that the GS1 standard covers, I suppose, all of the elements, the hardware, and we'd actually subdivide or segregate hardware into, physical readers, the tags, and then we would also refer to software. So we'd have 3 pieces in it. And what's in place in the standard is that the hardware is sending out a signal which the tag is responding to, and there's communication channels between those which the software then engages with. And as a software provider, all we have to worry about is the software, because as long as we're compliant, then we know that the other elements of this that we engage with will feed as per the standard. So hugely beneficial for us.
Thank you, Dave. So then just briefly in terms of comparison to other wireless technologies. So when we talk about RFID, we're talking about a generic term which describes different types of technologies at different frequencies. So for example, you may be familiar with the terms active and passive RFID, which Dave will actually explain in the next slide. But as Siobhan mentioned earlier, I just want to point out here that there is an initiative to brand passive UHF technology with the term RAIN, so that it will be as recognizable as Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So just for instance, if you could imagine asking if there was IEEE 802.11 available instead of Wi-Fi, it doesn't really roll off the tongue. So similar to the GS1 UHF Gen 2 protocol or ISO 1863 standard. And just to mention that GS1 are supporting this initiative. So just then briefly in terms of the history of RFID. So technically the first use of RFID was during World War II. So in the 1940s, where radar technology was used to identify enemy and friendly aircrafts. So RFID technology has come a long way since its invention. So with security tags first being used in the 60s and the rollout of RFID toll road payments. So by the year 2000, there were actually over 1,000 patents submitted using RFID technology. So as Siobhan mentioned in this presentation, we will be concentrating on RFID in terms of what falls under the RAIN brand or GS1 UHF Gen 2 protocol and the ISO standard. So just for a brief comparison to the timelines of when other well-known wireless technologies were first commercially available, we have Wi-Fi here in 1997 and Bluetooth in 1999. And NFC in 2002. Yeah, so Dave, if you wouldn't like to add anything else to this slide, I can hand over to you and move on to the next.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this slide gives you a high level or a 30,000 feet view of the types of things that we're looking at when we're looking at RFID. So firstly, we have 2 types. There's active and there's passive. And then we have a number of subdivisions within the passive. So I suppose the main thing when you're looking at that is active is battery based. So the active tag works on its own, it emits a signal, and it communicates with transponders or other tags based upon this. It's continuously pulsing, and it's a real-time location tracking identifier. On the passive side, that only responds when a reader is within read range. So what you're looking at based upon the two different types of structures, naturally the active tag will give you a longer read range because it's battery based, and as a result it's also much more expensive. The range that you can get from an active tag, as Siobhan mentioned earlier, can be up to 100 meters and in some cases greater than that. On the passive side, we're looking at a smaller read range, and within the passive technology we've got a low frequency, which is very low range, credit card, you know, your NFC kind of feel. You've got high frequency, which gives you up to about 1 meter, and then you've got UHF, which is the range standard, and it varies, I suppose, you know, if you're looking probably 20 feet, but there are tags out there that do read up to 100 feet, and that's a combination of the reader that you're using and the tag that's responding. So in terms of cost, the cost of an active tag, and I'm going to talk dollars here because typically that's the way they're priced. You know, you're looking at $3 to $5 a tag, and you can go up to several $100s based upon what it is that you're looking at. On the passive side, where we are in the aviation space, it's probably about $1 a tag, but that's because of the volumes. If you go into the Walmart business, which I'll touch on in another slide, you're down to sub 10 cents per tag. The standards, obviously on the passive side, we do have the GS1 standard, and that goes right across the industry, and therefore, you know, if you're looking at tagging anything, you have that benefit that you have a single standard, and it allows you to track whatever's needed. On the active side, it tends to be more proprietary, and therefore, I suppose, although the benefit of the read range, and also there's an element of robustness in there, you are dependent on that, you know, solution provider. So I suppose to summarize, the pros on the active tag side is the read range. You know, it's I suppose you're looking at encroaching on kind of the GPS, that sensor type of thing, and obviously because of the structure or the form factor of the active tag, it allows for rugged environment. On the passive side, they're smaller tags, therefore they're cheaper. They can also be more flexible and therefore, you know, attached to more items. You've got a higher range of tag options, and there's more providers in that space, and they'll last a lifetime without a battery. You know, I think they're saying that 100,000 reads and writes on a passive tag, so you know, you're into the life of whatever it is that you're trying to track. Do you want to go to the next slide there, Amanda, please? Okay, so just in terms of the industries that it's used in, I'm actually going to start in retail, because Walmart, I think, really did put RFID, I suppose, commercially on the map. They went through a huge amount of pain back in the early 2000s. They decided that they would engage with their suppliers and they would get them to tag pretty much everything that came in. They struggled in terms of who was going to carry the cost of the tag, and they also struggled because of the read ranges or the read rates. Back in the early 2000s is not what it is today. They also struggled with basic things like the adhesive on the tag and making sure that the tag stayed on the product that it was originally attached to. So they had a lot of problems that they encountered, but in going through those problems, they came out the far side and really, like I say, did commercialize the use of RFID technology. In healthcare, I suppose we're all pretty familiar with where we are with that, but the HSE has a great program at the moment. They're tagging their assets. And again, there's a number of different parties involved in that, all using the same standards. In addition to that, though, you'll see patients are now tagged, and tagged is probably not a fair term to use, but there's a wristband applied to the patient to allow for tracking of the patient. Staff can also be managed or tagged or tracked and that can be a lanyard or it can be a tag in their clothing. I suppose with COVID and the current pandemic, that opens up to huge things in terms of tracking people in their movement where they're COVID negative or COVID positive, and it does facilitate early warning signals in terms of people meeting other people, and I suppose that co-mingling of negative and positive. We also have things like precious samples and IT assets. In the aviation space, I suppose it's behind healthcare, but having said that, on an aircraft today, if you're flying, and I know not many of us are flying at the moment, but pre-COVID, if you were flying up to 62 different component types, could be tracked on an aircraft. Obviously, the big one would be life vests or oxygen generators, because they're the most used or most populous on the aircraft. But medical kits, slides, rafts, crowbars, crash axes, handcuffs, beacons, it just goes on and on. And aviation has adapted to use this in this small space with a handheld reader, and you can now complete an aircraft scan in a matter of minutes. On a 757, which is about 160 seats, you can complete a life vest check in under a minute. So great benefits there. On the manufacturing side, obviously production line based, you're tracking raw materials and you're also tracking the finished product. On logistics and transport, I suppose that's moved because of vehicle tracking, trailer tracking. Now in loading bays at the dock doors, you can actually identify what's going on to the vehicle to make sure that it's on the right vehicle, so that that whole thing of trying to find something that's lost doesn't occur anymore, because what you're looking at is actually knowing that product A that is go to customer X, that's actually happening in real time, and you can stop it if there's an issue. And then finally, Siobhan, do you want to comment on clothing?
Absolutely, yes. I think certainly clothing is rich for opportunities, and we see a lot of clothing stores today carry the RFID tags. I suppose I specifically wanted to mention the recent launch of the Decathlon store in Ireland. I think most of our audience is based in Ireland and has probably seen some news about Decathlon. If you haven't, it's a French sports store, clothing store. They actually manufacture. They basically own the supply chain end to end, because majority of products that they sell are products that they design themselves and manufacture themselves. They engaged with our colleagues in GS1 France on an RFID project a number of years ago, and they have given some great presentations around successes they've achieved in applying the RFID, the RAIN RFID UHF Gen 2 protocol based on GS1 standards. And in fact, I recently saw a presentation from the people involved in the project, and they said one of the key successes for them was actually having the standard embedded from the start, because every time they talked about new opportunities with them, when they talk about new opportunities with their board, because they've standardized, it makes the rollout and scale of what they're trying to do much more doable and cost effective. So if you haven't yet been to the Decathlon store, certainly keep your eyes open, because every single item has an RFID tag sewn into it, and even your shopping basket is captured using the RFID tag. So it's a great live example of something that's been really successfully implemented.
Thanks, Siobhan. Next slide, please, Amanda. Thanks. So here we're looking at two completely different environments. We're in the healthcare space and we're in the aviation space, both of which ASD are involved in. We have the same tag, hypothetically, but in one case we've put it on a wheelchair, and in the other case we've put it on a life vest under a seat in the aircraft. And what we're in a position to do using the same hardware, the same tag and the same software, is identify the movements of both items. So in healthcare, the wheelchair, the movement of that wheelchair, and we can record things like the cleaning of the wheelchair, if the wheelchair has been broken and has needed to be repaired. All of that can be recorded around this unique identifier that's encoded on the tag. On the right-hand side, the life vest, basically a life vest has got a 10-year life. So when you're looking on aircraft, you're looking at both the presence of the life vest and also that the life vest is in limit, that it hasn't expired. And all of this, it can be addressed and can be achieved, like I say, using the same technology, the same system, and the same hardware. Next slide, please, Amanda. Thanks. So just, I suppose, to look at a couple of the different tag types, just on the right-hand side before we look at the tag types, the, I suppose, main components of an RFID tag, not just the infrastructure itself, the technology itself, but there's the human readable element on the face of the tag, and also the barcode that's printed at time of printing and encoding. But the tag itself is constructed of a chip and the antenna. So the chip is what allows for the storage of the unique identifier, and in some cases in aviation, it also tracks things like part number, serial number, date of manufacturer or expiry date. And then the antenna is what determines the read range. So when you're looking at a tag, if the tag is very small, then highly likely that the read range will be small. There is an optimum size for a tag that gives you that optimum read range. So, you know, I suppose when you're looking at potential projects, tag size is important. Just to look at a couple of examples on the left-hand side, one thing that I didn't mention relating to passive tags is you can get what's known as a BAP tag, which is a battery-assisted tag. So it's kind of stealing some of the active tag's thunder, if you want, in that it does have a battery, and that what that allows for is that the read range can be further. It's not that it continuously pings. The concept is still that the reader emits the signal, but the tag, the BAP tag, can be further from the reader, allowing it to respond. Other form factors, the wristband for a patient, or the credit card sized tag for staff. You know, you can put it on your lanyard and so forth. And we also have, I suppose, the standard label. You know, when you're labeling boxes or cartons or pallets or so forth, the same type of label applies. You can put a chip or a tag on the back of that label, and when printing via RFID printer, you can have the encoding and printing happening at the same time. New and exciting flexible tags are now there to allow for positioning on items that are not, you know, straight, that can be curved, cylindrical, and so forth. And it also allows for metal mount tags, so that you can put on metal objects now. Two issues for RFID is metal and liquid, and with these metal mount tags, it means that metal issue is now kind of gone away. And lastly, I suppose in aviation, because that's, you know, where we started, it's funny because, you know, in tracking 62 different component types on aircraft, the number of different tag types needed is actually very few, and we now have it down to 3 or 4 different tag types. So although there's a huge variety of tag types, I think when you're looking at a project implementation, the thing to look for is to settle on a small number of tag types, which facilitates, you know, savings in terms of volumes of tags and so forth. Amanda, next slide, please. Thanks. So why use RFID? And I think anybody that's on the call this morning probably has ideas. And one of the things that I would say from the outset is that every time we meet with a new customer, during that engagement, there will be new ideas, you know, that are there to challenge us. We love it. It's good to be challenged all of the time, but it's incredible the ideas and the concepts that people have, and the problems, I suppose, that you're trying to manage. But basically what it'll come down to is that either your staff are stressed, you don't have enough time, what you're doing at the moment is too costly, or too many items that you're trying to track are going missing. And you know, that's a common thing, I think, going across every industry. So in terms of looking at RFID gives you that opportunity to implement a fixed reader solution if that's, I suppose, what's needed, but that allows you to continuously read tagged items without any human input. They're just always reading. And therefore you're capturing data for anything that moves past an entry point, an exit point, or other strategic areas within your facility. You can also use the handheld then to go and find things, and you can do that far quicker because you'll know the last known location of whatever it is that you're trying to find. So I suppose the concept of a lost item should be in the past, and you should have a general idea of what it is that needs to be found or used or calibrated or so forth. And that gives you that the price of hardware, the price of the tags is coming down all of the time. And I suppose in the same way when barcode started out, you know, it was expensive, and now it's, you know, it's on everything. You know, there's no additional price for that. RFID is going in the same direction. If you look at baggage tags, they are sub 5 cents, I think now, and it's now a commodity that the airlines buy in huge quantities. The other thing, I suppose, is that in addition to tracking an item, there's also hugely valuable information that you're gathering as part of that tracking. And it's also an early warning system if something should be checked, inspected, overhauled, serviced. You know, once you capture that you have sensed or read that tag, then you're in a position to take it out of circulation and ensure that the right activities happen at that time. Next slide, please, Amanda. Okay, and I suppose this is what I was mentioned earlier. Rather than just looking at the hardware and software, what we have is we have 3 sections. We have the hardware, then we have the tags and tag types, I suppose, and the software. All, I suppose, looking just at the item down at the bottom, the GS1 standard, it crosses the 3 sections for us. So when you're looking at a potential project, I suppose, you know, for me, I would suggest research the project, engage with others who have been involved in other projects, talk to GS1 and other companies that can guide you along the right line. And I would say, rather than the big bang approach, it's good to have a pilot, it's good to have a POC. It allows you to dabble and engage with the technology, to learn valuable things. You know, it is a technology, it doesn't address everything, so it's good to find that out early days on a smaller project, rather than going for bust and you know, implementing facility wide. I would say try and qualify what it is, you know, your goals at the start. So rather than kind of having a hazy idea of you know, what it is that you're looking for out of this, try and identify qualified items that determine whether your pilot or your POC was a success, and then accept that and move forward. So I think it fits nicely together with the GS1 standard, and I do think that adds you know, huge benefits to that. I think it's back to you, Siobhan.
Thank you. Yeah, and just before we go to the next slide, I just comment as well, Dave, that I suppose you've mentioned there about the GS1 compliance systems, and we are seeing GS1 both here in Ireland and in other countries, a much higher increase in requests for software systems to go through certification and accreditation. And I should mention as well that that Dave has already gone through accreditation a couple of times and is currently going through re-accreditation. So that really is end-to-end I suppose, accreditation of the system, that it is fully compliant. And I should also mention that we have had a number of requests as well from healthcare providers here in Ireland that are looking at implementing new systems, and they're looking to us to provide some input around specifying and defining what GS1 compliance means. So I think we're going to see a lot more in this space in the future. So then moving on to benefits, and I'm conscious of time as well. I think David's touched on a number of benefits, and as you mentioned, you start off on a project and actually start to discover and realise additional benefits as you go through it and start to talk about different areas and different opportunities. They could be loosely, I suppose, grouped into 3 different areas around cost reductions and savings, improved quality of service, and that could be healthcare or other sectors, and also improved risk management. So there are multiple benefits, and we can certainly go into those in more detail, depending on the use case and the projects that you might be considering. So if we go then on to the next slide, Amanda. Really, I suppose it's time now to summarise, and I think we've had a wealth of information and nuggets of information from Dave on his broad experience in this area. And the key takeaways really are around having, I suppose, the right partner, first of all, that can give you the right input, advice, guidance, and brings their own experience to the table. Having the right hardware, and it's even just in selecting the right type of tags, as you heard, adhesive, flexible, inflexible, there's lots of different types, so there's certainly some guidance. And also there's a lot more different types of tags evolving as more people start to engage with RFID solutions. Software and compliance to GS1 is really important, and I suppose designing a system, a solution that is standards based means that it's standardized, scalable, future-proofed, interoperable, which is really important, and technology neutral. So that's, I suppose, they're the quick summary of the key takeaways. Then I'll just a quick reference in terms of resources, pointing to our website. We publish regular newsletters. In case you'd like to sign up, you can scan the barcode there with your mobile phone. We're active on social media, both Twitter and LinkedIn, and maybe you saw this webinar through one of those channels. And we also have advisory services, so really guiding people, particularly when they start off in projects, as to what the standard means and how they should be including it. Also in terms of specifications, and we should also mention certification accreditation there as well. Then the next slide, so just reference to our solution provider program, and thank you again, Dave, to presenting today, and hopefully we'll be hearing from others in future webinars as well. So I think now we're going to go to some questions. Amanda, you've been monitoring the questions, and I appreciate we're running a little bit tight on time, so if you do have a question, please just type it in and we'll certainly get back to you if we don't get to cover it today.
So thanks, Siobhan and Dave. I think we've covered a lot in the presentation there, but just a couple of questions here. So I think this is a good one, which is, what do I do if a tag falls off?
Okay.
Dave, I might ask you to comment.
It is a good question because it does happen. And I suppose, going back to the Walmart story, that was one of the major issues that they had. But, it is a thing that happens. It can be due to rough usage, the environment that you're in and so forth. But basically, if you have a tagged item and the tag falls off the item and you discover this, you can then either reprint and encode the existing tag based on the information in your software system, or you can create a new tag. And part of it is that when this new tag is applied to the item or the object, then it replaces the other tag. So if the initial tag is found at a later date, it's now not associated to anything, and therefore, it's not misleading or irrelevant.
Great, thanks, Dave. Then I have 2 here, which I will group together because I think the answers are kind of similar. So the first part of it is, I have an RTLS solution installed. Can I use it to track RFID tags? And then added to that, do we have to have a fixed reader / infrastructure in place to get started? So Siobhan and Dave, if you'd like to comment.
Okay, well,
Dave,
if I can,
go ahead.
yeah, well, I was going to say if I can have a go at that first. Firstly, the frequencies that these tags, active and passive, and LF, HF, and UHF, the frequency at which they work means that they're not interoperable. So therefore, the infrastructure that you have for an active technology versus the infrastructure that you'll need for UHF solution is different. And therefore the networks you would have are different. So if you're having RTLS and you're having a UHF infrastructure, then it's two infrastructures to track the two different types of tag. And then, sorry, Amanda, the second point?
Just in terms of, do we have to have a fixed reader or infrastructure in place to get started?
Okay, and I would say that's part of the project assessment. I wouldn't say yes or no, but what I would say is it is possible to go scanning with a handheld reader. The thing about the handheld reader is that you need somebody, to operate that handheld reader. So it may defeat part of the project goals. The density or the number of readers that you need to implement, though, you can look at that and you can engage generally, say, entry-exit points, and then you can move to each area within the building as you grow the project. So you can survive on a handheld first, if that's what you choose to do, but you can also look at your network or your hardware infrastructure as an ongoing process rather than a single big bang.
Great,
and Dave, I might add just the first question. I think it's a very important point that I don't think it's always a case of RTLS or RFID. I mean, we've seen them coexist very successfully. Yeah. And I think the challenge is that sometimes the Wi-Fi networks can be completely overburdened with, all the different types of usages. So sometimes it works actually to have a dedicated RFID network to kind of track all those, high volume, to kind of manage that scale as you start to track more and more items within be it a hospital setting or be it in a different industry environment. But then you actually have an RTLS solution for more focused, very specific use. I think it's a combination of the two. But certainly, if you're looking for scale, robustness, future-proofing, I think the RFID is probably the way to go.
Absolutely.
So I think this question is particularly topical in healthcare, and especially at the moment. So it is, can an RFID label be smudged with some cleaning solutions or through constant cleaning? And I'm just going to group that with another question which I have, which is, are there any issues with surfaces which I should consider? If you'd like to talk about the two of those points, I'll ask you to start, Dave, particularly on the cleaning, and then on I think another important point to address here would be the on metal tags as well. So if we start with the cleaning and the actual surface of the RFID label.
Sure, and I suppose, at the project outset, when you're considering what it is that you're going to tag and track, that should have an impact or a decision-making factor in the tag that you select, because certainly, yes, if some of the cleaning fluids that are used now, if you're spraying that on a tag, that may remove the printed information on the tag. Also, I know of material in the aviation sector that's used for cleaning, which is really harsh environment, that will just erode a tag completely. So yeah, tag selection should be based around your environment that you're in. Siobhan, would you have a comment on that?
No, I think certainly you have the expertise there, and I'd leave it to your expertise too.
And then I suppose, Amanda, you did raise a good point about metal mount. So again, based upon what you're trying to track, if, say, thinking about the healthcare space, if you're looking at wheelchairs, beds, infusion pumps, things that are largely metallic, then it is worth considering the metal mount tag. They are more expensive, but what it does mean is that when you place the tag on the object, that you will get that read range. If you're going to put a tag that is not specific for purpose, then either one, you may get no read range at all, because the metal will absorb the sense or the opportunity for the tag to respond. And secondly, I think the read range will certainly be reduced. So to get the maximum benefit out of this infrastructure, whether it be a handheld environment or a fixed reader or a combination of both, it is worth that additional investment to get the full benefit from that.
Great, thanks, Dave. So I'm just going to ask one final question, just in the interest of time, because we have many coming in here, but we can send out a summary of them with the recording of the webinar also. But just a point here, which is, will we see in the future RFID tags based on GS1 standards on consumer goods or goods in retail stores? So to replace barcodes, and if yes, when? So
well, I know, Siobhan, if you go back to Decathlon, we're at that already. I wouldn't see the barcode being replaced. I would say that the RFID tag will augment what the barcode already does. So rather than having to scan the barcode, RFID doesn't need line of sight. So therefore, in your shopping trolley, you can have a number of different items, possibly on top of one another, and that's where RFID will read everything for you. It will, add to, say, in Decathlon, it'll add to your bill and so forth and so on. With your credit card, it can read the chip. So therefore, the process will become easier, it'll become quicker, it'll become more efficient. And I suppose it's the combination of the human readable, the barcode, and the RFID is what I would see as being in place. And in terms of a when, I think that capability is there now. It's just a case of when we decide to adopt it.
Yeah, I would agree, Dave. And I think it, I suppose, goes back to then the combination of the hardware, software, and standard, and the identifier that's in the barcode I mean, the RFID tag is just another data carrier, and it's, as you say, it'll augment, enhance, and who knows where it'll ultimately go. But I absolutely agree, they will coexist for a long time yet. Yeah, so Amanda, I think I just heard you there. So I think, yes, we'll finish up now. First of all, thank you to our guest speaker, Dave, and your wealth of expertise and knowledge today. We hope you enjoyed the session. We'd certainly love to hear any other questions you may have. We'll follow up with any questions that didn't get answered. And please let us know if you'd like to hear more, because I think this is certainly a very interesting area. I think it's going to evolve in many different sectors, and we certainly will be following up with some additional sessions to build on what we started today. Thank you to all of you for joining, and we'll certainly look forward to hearing from you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.